kind of the process in terms of how it relates to hard dollar. So we're just going to go with the principles first, and then we're going to get right into kind of how it translates into hard dollar. Obviously, perfection is near impossible, but what I really hope that we get out of these things is that we get maybe a 10% increase in the way that we do things in our proficiency, our efficiencies, our productivity, that we may not get to 100% in terms of total project then, but if we can get to something that's much closer to perfection, then we've made some big strides. There's obviously been a huge shift in terms of focus for us specifically when it comes to project focus, where project cost reconciliation becomes very cost-driven as well as time-driven, where a few years ago time was a little bit more heavily weighted than even cost from that perspective. But with today and post-recession, cost has been more important than ever for us, which has helped us out quite a bit in terms of within our marketplace. But within every industry, which in mining, oil and gas, environmental, infrastructure, the capital project shift to focus on cost has been a prominent one. Critical business consequences of cash, a few things. Credit resources, really kind of having less credit resources than most companies had 4 or 5 years ago. Cash availability, obviously, than most companies had 4 or 5 years ago is far less today than it was a few years ago. And then really, bottom line is just competitive survival. Doing a lot more with a lot less, going after things that you may not have gone after in the past. And all that being said, it's more important now than ever to pay attention to what those detailed costs are and how to measure those things. And that's what we're going to focus on today with the Earned Value session. So we really have 2 elements here. One of them is cost model planning and then project cost performance. And we're going to kind of focus on both, making both of those sing together so that we can better improve our project outcome and increase our chances of coming in at the right number. So what I've put together first is really kind of the 8 characteristics of credible cost estimates. And this really is the foundation for all the progress stuff that we're going to do here in just a few minutes. Because without this, and without tying all these things together, we really wouldn't have the outcome that we're looking for. Number one, from the estimate perspective, is we absolutely have to have a clear identification of the task from a specific understanding of not only what the estimator was thinking, but when we build these work packages out that we're going to do here in a second, what that task is, and so that all the way from the planning stage to the foreman and the supervisor when we're on site, we're all on the same page as to what we're trying to accomplish. The second one is really broad participation and preparation. And what I mean by that is when we create these cost models, we're not doing these things kind of in a vacuum, that we're including other groups, other business units, other people in the preparation so that information that's contained within it has a kind of a broader set of eyes on it so that there's a better chance that we're going to get it right. The third one is almost general in itself, but it's a really important one, the availability of valid data. History comes into play here. Current performance comes into play here. Having that data available in a warehouse of database of some sort versus mega spreadsheets that we have to go out and find is really kind of where we want it to be. The fourth one here is my standardized structure for the estimate. Really being consistent, having a process we're going to follow every time, so that regardless of who it is that's putting it together, what team, where they're located, what geography, it doesn't matter. Our goal, again, I'm not pretending we can get to 100%, but I definitely think we can make improvements to then to make big improvements to get to more of a standardized structure for the estimate. My next one is really kind of provisioning for program uncertainties. So how do you plan for what you don't know? Well, lots of things in terms of, we may not know every detail, but we certainly know that there's specific trends that are likely to happen, and then if we have the right things in place, the systems to accommodate it. I mean, a big one of those would be escalation, of course, inflationary factors, political years in which we expect things to occur. Weather is another big one in terms of cycles through that as well. And all of those kind of uncertainties, building in that escalation model so that it's part of the system. My next one was pretty specific here on recognition of inflation. It's often left out, but especially on mine projects or 15, 30-year, 10-year projects, this obviously becomes a kind of a big deal for us on long-term projects and making sure that's included. Recognition of excluded cost, and what I mean by that is that aside from the direct costs that we may encounter, all of the indirect costs and overhead costs that are forgotten, that we didn't take the ability to learn from the previous data that we had, to recognize some excluded costs that we can learn some lessons from on previous work. And then the last one is really the independent review of estimates. Not only just broad participation, but creating a wall, if you will, so that we have two separate sets of kind of eyes that are building it and seeing how close we come out between those two things to understand how close they are, and having a process that follows that. But the leaders in this space are doing all of these things, and certainly there are more to it than just these blocks. But these would be really kind of the top 8 of what builds out that typical estimate in terms of building a really good model that we're going to build earned value on. So if I'm following the process, auditors should make sure to, number one, make sure that the cost element is valid and applicable, that go against our rules to make sure that that element is justifiable, that the labor includes a time phase breakdown, so that the labor that's associated with each activity is time phased, so we know when it's going to happen. That's going to be critical for us in a few minutes when we start to figure out our earned value calculations. That our calculations on each element are correct. And we might say, hey, we're going to stamp out spreadsheets because that's our motto here at Hard Dollar, but we understand that in real life there's going to be some spreadsheets that are just never going to go away. We hope they do, but they just don't. So making sure that those calculations on each of those elements are correct and mostly profiled on the spreadsheet perspective. And then program is accurate total of all the sub elements. Going back to kind of the spreadsheet thing here then too, making sure that everything adds up. And then escalation was applied over time so that we absolutely do have the feasibility to put that escalation into the estimate. So I just want to run through a couple quick, really kind of super interesting projects with you. The first one being this NASA case and how they kind of applied to the 8 principles that I had just mentioned a second ago, measuring that up because, and this is public information, so I kind of picked these next couple projects to share. But 0 out of 10 projects followed all those basic steps according to their review. 3 out of the 10 projects over the 8-year span included a detailed WBS, and 2 of 10 measured cost, performance, identity, risk. So, these are big projects not following the process. In another particular case study, I'll just use another government one, case study on U.S. Customs. This is a $1 billion project for commercial. No formal cost model was used, so there were a variety of spreadsheets with no consistency. No structured documented process for determining size reuse. So there's no, from a size of the activities within it, there was no reuse on determining what, based on the size of the activities that were in it, to do any type of scale to get a better handle on cost. And then the last one is no relevant measured normalized historical data to calibrate models. No historical data was used when they built these things out. And that was part of their explanation as to why they were so far over on the budget on this. So now that we've kind of gone over the cost model thing, let me just kind of shift to earned value and how we're going to apply that to the cost model itself. So what is it? It's a project management process that takes schedule performance and cost performance and then uses that together to help us understand really where we're at. And it does answer the question, what did we get for the money that we spent? If we've spent this much so far, what did we actually get for that and how productive we are? We're going to go into what qualifies that as well too. It's been used since the 60s. It's part of the CERT and the CSSC control system criteria, and it just was recently revised just a few years ago and adopted as ANSI EIA 748. So let's kind of get to the basics of it. When we talk about earned value, we're really talking about our budget times our percent complete. Pretty simple. Not a lot going on there. Just here's our budget. This is what we planned, and times our percent complete, and that really equals our earned value. So I came up with a couple examples, and we're going to take through and kind of build up to some more difficult ones here in a second. All of them are pretty simple, but we'll get a little bit more complex as we kind of go along, and I'll show you kind of how that applies in Hard Dollar. So if we say, for example, we have a contract for a railroad that's 4 miles long, and to keep all the numbers the same, kind of to make the math easy, we have a railroad track that's 4 miles. We're supposed to do this work in 4 weeks, and it's going to cost us $4 million. So after 3 weeks of work, we've only spent $2 million, and everybody's pretty happy, like in the picture there. Everyone's excited because it's been 3 weeks, and for some reason it just it comes up here that we're $2 million, which just seems like we're way under where we had planned to be, and that's a really good thing because of the dollars and the time. But what we're missing from this, obviously, is how much work have we actually done, and hence the big red circle there. So unfortunately, though, when you start to really look at it, you find out that we've only gone 1 mile. So we're 3 weeks into this thing. We've spent more than we thought we were going to spend, and we've only achieved 25%. And that's where we start to tie all 3 of the triangle things together: the time, the scope, and that delivery. Only 25%, so we're in trouble here. So if we take earned value, and then it's our budget time per percent complete, and that equals earned value, and we look at our railroad project, which we plan on spending $4 million, we've actually only earned, if we've only gone 25%, that 1 mile that we just looked at, we've only earned $1 million worth of work. If we've earned $1 million worth of work, it's not good that obviously we spent $2 million, right? And we did that in 3 weeks. So if we keep going at this rate, that same project's going to cost $8 million if we keep going at the same rate we're going at, and it'll take 12 weeks to complete. And that's a far cry from the 4, that we had planned on. So, and this is nobody wants this, angry office staff, as a result, and project managers. So, so how do we do that? So how do we really how do we fix that? That's great that we know what the problem is. How do we fix it? Well, if we can bring together the schedule and the scope together, like I've got here on these screens, where the scope on the left-hand side lists out my work, and on the right-hand side I have my schedule. Now I've got the ability to do that. I can bring cost performance and schedule performance in one view, in one life tied together, to bring a true picture of what that value is at any point in time. If I can't bring start and finish dates along with my scope and really understand where that's at, I can't get there. But I'm going to kind of take you through how to do that, how that works with hard dollar here in a second, and then make that happen. Benefits, obviously, on the operational side, there's many benefits, but a couple of them are production factors and then mitigating the risk so that the back office really understands what the people are doing out in the field, and then the field people actually have a great venue to actually publish what's happening as that work gets performed. On the financial side, aside from just government reporting compliance, but be able to predict pretty accurately, where we stand today versus where we thought we stood, like in that railroad project, and really get a good handle on not only cash flow prediction, but also resource prediction. If it's a 2-year, 3-year project, and we have certain resources that we haven't even deployed yet, all of that library information, all of the resources that we got going into it, the equipment, the materials, all those things kind of give us a better understanding. If we know where we're really at today, we can predict much better where we're going to be. So what industry trends are affecting earned value? Owner budgets are being reduced, so that affects us with credit limitations and less capacity for risk. There's much greater scrutiny going on, it seems like, in the last couple of years than ever before, asking the question, are we on track, have we overpaid? And I'll just kind of get right into it. So within hard dollar, here's how this thing gets lined up. The first thing we want to do is we want to define the work, and this is a kind of a sample box that I pulled out of the cost breakdown structure to show an example of how that work's actually defined by level 1 elements, level 2 elements, level 3 elements. And typically, from a hard dollar perspective, when we start applying earned value to each progress item, the level that we're going to do it at can be at any activity level like this. But what's normal, instead of running around with the guys in white lab coats, checking widgets that have been done on simple drawings and complex drawings at every detail level, what's typically normal is up here at the level 1 item. So we might have 100 different level 1 items, but those quantities that are going to be performed against each one of those level 1 items can be easily measured because we know the hours, we know the quantities, and we know what's expected from a production perspective. The next thing we're going to do is, now that we know what the work is, as we defined kind of at the beginning of the presentation, and how it's defined down in detail and how we scrutinized it, now we're going to add some planned values to it from a budget perspective. So right next to that description, we know what the work is, and now we're going to add a planned value, a budgeted amount, right, for that item. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go over to Primavera or Microsoft Project, and we're going to go ahead and create these dependencies from the scope that we created over in hard dollar, which now allows us to go out and continue and finish and finalize the schedule. So we're going to go ahead and schedule the work so that it ties together with what we've done in hard dollar. Now let's tie it all together. So we've done it. We created the budget in hard dollar. We've planned the work out. We've detailed it. We've started to progress the work. And now what does it tell us? So here's another example I've got in here on this hard dollar job. $1 million job, we're going to hit the $500,000 mark halfway through it if everything goes right, and it's going to tell us a lot of stuff. It's going to tell the owner how much we're expecting to spend over time, and what do we need to track this down here at the bottom. So as long as I've got my estimate and we budgeted it out just like we did, and I've got my cost-loaded schedule that I did from hard dollar, I'm in good shape and I'm going to be able to do this. So let's go through the example. I'm halfway through the time, and instead of being at $500,000 of work earned, I've only earned $450,000. So we're a little behind here on the quantity of production that we've actually done. We should have completed this much work. We actually completed only $450,000. However, the good news is, from an actual cost perspective, even though we've only earned $450,000 of the work, we've actually only cost us $400,000 for our ACWP. So we're achieving less than we had planned on the schedule. However, we're spending less than we had thought to get to this point. So production-wise, we're doing actually pretty good. Schedule-wise, we're not doing as hot as we thought we were going to do. So how are owners contractors doing EVM today? I mean, if we do this without hard dollar, and I'll go back to hard dollar here in a second, obviously a lot of it kind of a focus on the ERP side and the accounting side. And if you can tie the triangle together in ERP, that's fantastic, but it typically doesn't work like that. And the level of detail that you're down at is usually not at that same level that we just looked at a second ago when we were looking at those level 1, level 2 items. Typically it's account code level or higher. So our focus on the finance systems, yes, and project focus systems, HD and Primavera Microsoft Project. So let's kind of go through this real quickly, and I'll get a little bit more into hard dollar, but I want to explain kind of the detail process. So SBI is really the formula of earned value divided by planned value, and SBI tells us how effectively we're progressing from plan to progress. If FBI is greater than 1, more work has been completed than planned, that's good. If FBI is less than 1, then less work has been completed than planned, and that's bad. So if SBI is equal to 1, our work is equal to plan, and that's a miracle. That just never happens because that's right on the money. But typically we're going to be one or the other, and if we were exact, it would be incredible, and that's kind of the Zen piece that I said we probably never get to. We look at CPI, we look at it from a little bit different perspective, right? So our cost performance index is really what our earned value is, how much work we've actually earned on the work from a production perspective, divided by our actual cost. So our CPI is equal to what we've earned divided by our actual cost. If it's less than 1, we're spending less, or we're spending more, and then we're spending, and that's bad. If it's greater than 1, we're earning more than we're spending, and that's good. And again, on the equal to, it's obviously that's a miracle if that ever happens, and doesn't happen very often. When we look at EAC and how we put that into hard dollar here in a second, those variances are typical, but we kind of look at those 3 different ways, right? So we'll look at that as actual cost, budgeted at cost minus earned value. Also look at it as actual costs plus estimate to complete as another calculation. We also look at actual costs plus the budgeted at cost minus earned value divided by cost performance index. So we kind of look at it all 3 ways, taking the typical variance that it's going to stay the way it is from here on out, looking at past estimating assumptions being not valid and using the best entry from the last entry, and then also looking at averages. So variances will be present in the future when the current variances will continue. So hard dollar's got multiple ways of looking at it. Either this is how it's going to keep on going from how we last did it, the very last time we did it, because we got a better crew on the situation, even though we might have had 10 weeks of kind of horrible performance. Last Fridays is going to be the way it's going to be from here on out because we brought in a different crew. It also takes a look at the average. So if I've got my average perspective of the last 25 weeks, it can take the last 25 weeks and plan production based on that. It also has the concept of manual forecasting so that you can take the remaining difference of whatever the budget happens to be and say, I know that the performance has been this, it's been good or it's been bad. I don't really care. I'm just going to, I know that this is the way it's going to be from the rest of the way out. And then it throws all the math, out of it. So let's run through a case study that kind of makes sense again, and I'll tell you kind of how this works in hard dollar. If you've got a project to be completed in 12 months, and the total cost is $100,000, and after 6 months, $60,000 is spent, only 40% of the work is complete. So what does the SPI and the CPI for this project add up to be? Well, the actual cost at this point is $60,000. planned value of what we've planned so far is 50% of 100, so that's $50,000. And basically what we set up on top is 40% of the work is complete, so that's 40% of work. It would be 40% of earned value, which would be $40,000. So my schedule performance index is EV divided by PV, and that's $40,000. Divided by our 50,000 plan, that's 0.8. So our SBI is 0.8, which means we are behind schedule. Pretty simple math, easy to figure out. Hard dollar then takes the earned value divided by the actual cost, 40,000 divided by 60, which is 0.67, which means CPI is equal to 0.67, which means we are losing money. Because we're only doing as much work, we're only earning 67 cents for every dollar that we spend on the work. So how do we get there? It's really not possible for us to do this unless we're integrated with the schedule side of things. So hard dollars concentrating on the scope, hard dollars inclusion of the cost for that scope of work, and then the icing on the cake here is that connection to the start and finish dates, as dynamic as they are, and constantly being updated to scope and cost, make this all work, and then make the previous calculations possible. Here's the kind of holistic approach to what does this really mean in real life, to how does hard dollar connect with, and what are the critical items to make this process work. Certainly all of them are not necessary for earned value, but I wanted to throw up here real quick a quick touch point on what those things could be within the organization. From the ERP side into hard dollar, certain master elements like material masters, vendor master, project numbers. Again, a lot of those have nothing to do with earned value on those, but they are the master data coming from the ERP system. From the hard dollar perspective, planned pay items for what our agreements are either from the owner or with the owner, project status, and here's the WBS structure where it kind of comes into play for earned value. Also current budget, and original estimate, also passed into the ERP system. The current forecast, which is the earned value equations that we're figuring out right now, what we just did, coming out of hard dollar back into ERP, along with the earned value, and then those earned work information data that we were just covering a second ago. That's right here at the time entry, so hours and quantities to actually tell us how much have you done, how many man hours have you burned versus how much work have you actually performed. Actual cost comes into play here too, which is a mandatory necessity. We didn't really talk about actual cost too much, and that we did that for a reason, because our actual cost come into play here kind of at the end. So our ERP passing over to actual cost, and then down here with the schedule, so into P6 and Microsoft Project. And then some of the ancillary things like integration into SharePoint for documentation, CRM for contact information, and then field data. So access to skilled teams is still the #1 concern. So outside of the numbers, because it sounds great and everything, but how do I really make this work? How can I make the process, easy to train and easy to repeat? Well, so we try to address that too. One of the things that we've done is, with the process of hard dollar being these yellow buckets here, estimating as well as progress, creating really tight integration into the Primavera Microsoft schedule here, into the ERP side here, so that the budget information is coming from estimating into finance in an automated fashion, as well as taking the actuals back from the finance department back into estimating, and really creating a solid, fluid story from the account code that we're recording in hard dollar to the same account code that's in finance, so that there's a parallel here and we don't lose sight of mismatched cost and trying to align things and reconcile things at the end of a month. In fact, we're not waiting till the end of the month. We're entering data here on the progress side through project cost management with hard dollar, and being able to get weekly earned value equations throughout that process. And kind of boiling it down to 3 simple things for hard dollar, in the hard dollar bucket, which is #1, building the cost model here, measuring progress here for those quantities and those man hours, and then sending those forecasts over to finance, so that we're working together with the back office and the front office and the construction side to get that done. So why do all this, and why put all this effort to it and spend all this time talking about this? It's true, and this is a current stat from 2012 KPMG Construction Survey Study. Only less than 23% of all projects come in under planned budget. So there's got to be an opportunity for us to either improve the estimating side of the fence and improve our progress collection side, or forecasting, and then all of the above. It's still such a low number, really, when you look at the reality of things. of what that actually is. So how do we get there? I mean, if we look at the bottom of this bun, and we spent this whole time talking about the meat, number one, let's build a cost estimate to measure to original plan, making sure that that's solid and that our foundation for this earned value equation is actually right. Because without that strong estimate, we're not going to get there. We need strong leadership to help us back up on the EVM stuff. I mean, obviously, we go through this stuff, and it seems like it's pretty simple because they're not very complicated math. It's not very hard to collect quantities. But at the end of the day, it's a lot more difficult when we don't have the leadership in our back corner to help us get this stuff on the road. We need to make it clear that stakeholders are behind us and that they're going to reinforce accountability so we can get this stuff into a common database system so we can start measuring it. We also need management to be open on mitigating the risk on the results so that when we run into issues that we can actually fix those things and be committed to do this project the right way. EVM at the program level and EVM at the plan detail level. So we want to have it. We want to have it at the lowest level that we can get to without driving everybody crazy, and actually being realistic about it and making it work. We also want to use our past performance, history on that, and have the ability to take and look at our benchmarking data, our as-built data, and kind of put that stuff together so we can make better decisions from the beginning of the process to the end. And then we also want to make sure that we want to integrate cost, schedule, and performance, because without that, none of the stuff we talked about will work. It's fantastic if we had a great cost model, but if I can't take my cost model and meld that into where my schedule is at, all of the things we just talked about won't work. The neat part about this is, though, it can work, and it works really well today with these other systems if there's a commitment to do these things on the top, as I had mentioned. I put a couple of key information slides in there, or links in there as well too. I'm gonna post this presentation online, but before I go any further, are there any specific questions about how hard dollar deals with earned value, or any of the content that we just looked at today? I'm just looking at the chat window here to see if there's anything on there.
There is one question, Ron. The question is, at what level of granularity, or how easily can you tie back to activity level performance?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I'm just going to pop back to the CBS for a second to kind of give you an example. The actual level of detail that you can actually track and record earned value at can be as low as a Terminal 4, Terminal 5 item, deep into the work breakdown structure. The issue is that from a realistic perspective, you still have to have the mechanism and the people that are on site and not create extra work for them. It's how do I do this without creating a lot of extra work for my people that are on staff or that are on site? And most of our customers, and I'll just refer to kind of these level 1 items again. So when we construct the progress component and build it out of the estimate, most of our customers use level 1 categories to actually track against. So we're at an account code level with the progress, and then we use that same account code level to bring it over to SAP or Oracle Financials or JD Edwards. Where there it rolls up to a much higher level, like part of something that's either the same account code level, same account code, or GL. So that's a great question.
We have another question that came in. How does HD connect with P6? And are the costs also used on P6?
Yes. Hey, so that's a great question. So the question was, how does hard dollar integrate with P6, and are costs integrated with P6? So hard dollar, for every line item that we have in hard dollar, just like this one, there are resources that drive that item, and there are costs behind it, of course, as well. There's also a set of start and finish dates if it's a duration-based item. So for every item that we see here, hard dollar generates a scheduling activity in Primavera when that selection is chosen, so that each item that you're looking at in the work breakdown structure is set up in the schedule. So hard dollar truly provides kind of a cost and resource-loaded schedule, and we do that through the API that we have with Primavera. So hard dollar's got an API that sits on the outside of hard dollar. Primavera's got a Primavera API, and then we leverage that API on the server to communicate that data back and forth.
And a follow-up to that question is the earned value, is that controlled on the P6 side or in hard dollar?
So that's a great question. And I'm not bragging because I'm here at hard dollar, but most of the heavy lifting is on the hard dollar side, because really when it comes down to it, hard dollar is really, I don't want to say only picking up, but the only thing that matters to us on the P6 side is really the start and finish dates. All of the other heavy lifting is really done here, because behind, for example, this construction prep site, I may have, in this 150,000 cubic yards, I may have a crew, 2 pieces of equipment, 6 types of different laborers, all kinds of stuff that kind of make that up in that production, and my shift arrangements and everything else that kind of goes behind that. We manage that resource library, keep those rates up to date, manage those resources on the hard dollar side. If all we know is the start and finish dates from Primavera, we can figure out the earned value planned production, because we did it here to begin with. We knew that 152,000 cubic yards were going to take us 16 days. We didn't know what 16 days they were, but when they go over the schedule, we'll put it on the 16 appropriate days that it takes to do that work. But all of that calculation stuff, it gives us the answer to how many days is it going to take, how many people on the crew, what are the resources, what are the equipment, what are the total costs, all that stuff is behind that activity.
Thanks, Ron. We have one more question. When exporting into Microsoft Project or Primavera, can we export multiple CBS items into a single activity in the schedule? This would be similar to account codes, as the activities in a schedule, they don't necessarily match the CBS breakdown in the way that we bid for projects.
Okay. I hate to ask you to repeat. Can you repeat it one more time?
Yes. When exporting into Microsoft Project or Primavera, can we export multiple CBS items into a single activity in the schedule?
Okay.
And then it's followed up by this. It's similar to account codes, as the activities in the schedule don't match the CBS breakdown the way the projects are bid.
Okay, got it. Okay, so I think the question is, in terms of, there are two-part question. One is, can the items that are in the CBS be rolled into the schedule so that they're not one for one, but rolled up into a different either category or item type, so that it's not a one-to-one relationship, that it's a one-to-many? And the same thing kind of goes, but a little bit different question as it relates to account codes. So, for example, let me answer the scheduling question first. I might have all of these items by default connected to the schedule, but I may not care that items 1.1, 1.11, 1.12 complex drawings are scheduled items. They're just not going to be. But I'm going to have engineering items in the schedule. I'm going to have procurement items in the schedule. And I'll have construction items in the schedule. So Hard Dollar has the capability, if I had this box open right now, over on the right, you'd see roll-up schedule. And if I click roll-up schedule is going to take any dependent item that's underneath of these items and just include this top item here, right? But it'll have all of the child information into that parent item for what our total cost is and that quantity, and then roll that into the schedule. Likewise, when we talk about account codes, I may have, like, for example, I might do simple drawings in not only this item, and this is a pretty good example, but I'm also doing it in this item as well as 10 other items. And maybe every time I do simple drawings, they're all going into one account code. So Hard Dollar has the concept over on the right-hand side again that we can't see here of a column that lists account code. I would simply select the account code here, the account code for simple drawings here, and then when I bring up my template every time, I always have the account code listed in that column for that particular item, which is not a one-to-one relationship to the CBS items, but a direct relationship to the type of work that it is that corresponds and matches up with the way we classify it and from an accounting perspective. And so that we don't add extra work for the estimator, of course, when we're planning out that work for the very first time, and if we're doing this, kind of the best way, we've got a template set up for these different work types, and when those work types come in, they already have the account code on them, so that we're not creating all this extra work at the end of the day, and it keeps the account code related to the activity.
We've had a few more questions come in. This question is, there's no CPI and SPI column in job tracking sections. Do we need to buy an additional software module that specifically focuses on earned value?
If you have job tracking today, you should have CPI and SPI. One thing you might want to check is that under the column chooser, click up the column chooser, scroll down to your right, and see if those labels are not showing up in there. And if you need some help with that, by the way, I'm happy to help offline. So shoot me a note, and I'll contact you after the session, and then I'll walk you through how to get that set up. But you should have that. If you have job tracking, you should have that.
question is, what if I wanted to combine the CBS item 3.1 with 1.1.2 into one activity in the schedule? Is that possible?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that actually came up this morning with the customer. So that happens all the time. So if I wanted to, and I wanted to create work packages from my original work plan, let's pretend, for example, this is the way we've estimated it, but we may not have planned the work that way. So once I convert this over for job tracking, and I want to plan the work a different way, I may want to roll up this one, even item 1 here. This might become a sub item of some other item that I'm working on. So from a work package perspective, when I build those work packages, even though this is a Tier 1 item, this Tier 1 item then becomes an item underneath all of the other items I might have when I build a work package. It's not a one-to-one relationship when we build out work packages. I probably made that as kludgy as you could possibly make it because it's kind of a visual thing to show, but the answer is yes. Yeah, you can do that, and it does support that.
If you have any more questions, we still have some time if you'd like to submit them in the Q&A bar. At this time, we don't have any questions in queue.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what we'll do too is we'll send out, and it's a really kind of a nifty certificate you can put on the bottom of your resume, and show your friends and family. We'd be very proud to do that as well too. We're going to send a little Survey Monkey. It's got like 2 or 3 questions about some of the content that we did today. If you fill that out and send it back to us, we'll send you out your certificate today for today's workshop. Next month, we're doing Principles of Estimating in a kind of a similar fashion as well too. We're going to do a little bit more product stuff in that as well too, because we're support kind of the estimating side of things. And then every month we'll have kind of a different workshop on the different kind of categories. This month earned value, next month estimating, and then scheduling integration, I believe, is the month after. So I can't thank you enough. We had an awesome turnout today. Those were great questions. And if anyone needs assistance after the call and you'd like a specific copy of the presentation linked right away, my email address is ron.babich, B-A-B-I-C-H, @harddollar.com. That's ron.babich@harddollar.com, B-A-B-I-C-H. And my telephone number is 480-776-2934. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us. This is a great